Today on the Servant Leadership Podcast, we hear from Ed Moy, trusted advisor to President George W. Bush and former director of the U.S. Mint. From helping lead a presidential transition to overseeing national coin production during 9/11 and managing record-breaking demand during the 2008 financial crisis, Ed shares what servant leadership looks like when pressure is at its highest. Raised in a Chinese family restaurant by immigrant parents, Ed shares how early lessons in stewardship and integrity shaped how he led on the global stage, always with a mindset to build up others and leave things better than he found them. If you're interested in what real servant leadership looks like at the highest levels of government, this one's for you.
Ed, thank you so much for joining us on the Servant Leadership Podcast.
Well, you're very welcome, Chris, and that great introduction that preceded this won't earn you any free samples from the United States Mint.
So how does somebody become the director of the U.S. Mint?
You know, it's interesting. There have been 40 mint directors in our country's history. The Mint was established in 1792, so it was one of the very first parts of government. And there's been, like I said, 40. And we each of us have come from very different walks of life. Early on, it was Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson who agreed to ask David Rittenhouse, probably the foremost scientist in our early country, to become the first mint director. And it's ranged from my friend Philip Deal, who was Bill Clinton's mint director, who came from the Senate. So he understands the legislative history of how you get things done, to me, which is pretty much of a business person who is good at strategy and joined the Mint at a very critical time. Where initially my job was to help improve them, but also navigate growing electronic transactions and their impact on cash. But it ended up being one of the people at the table during the financial crisis advising Hank Paulson.
Wow. Your background is so interesting because you've led in the private sector, you've led now in the public sector. Talk a little bit, just give our audience a little bit of background of your private sector experience before jumping into the Mint.
Oh, sure. Happy to do so. My first job out of college was with Blue Cross and Blue Shield, which is a major health insurer. And I focused on the plan that was in Wisconsin and quickly went through the management training program and ended up in an area that not many people knew about back then, which was managed care. And that ends up being the HMO industry, which is probably the predominant way that most people get their health care today. So I've done that. And after my first stint of public service, I rotated out and became an advisor to a private equity firm, one of the major firms on Wall Street that focused on healthcare investments. And so I've had a wide variety there. And then since then, I've been an officer or a director of several public companies, including I'm an advisor to one of the largest North American commercial drone companies, which is called Dragonfly. I'm also a director of a company that does waste to energy. Taking plastics and converting them to a certain type of diesel fuel that burns very, very cleanly. So I have a wide variety of interests in the private sector.
So you made a jump at some point to the public sector, working with the White House, working with the U.S. Mint.
Yep.
I'm sure you had all kinds of expectations going in, good and bad, and now you've kind of seen both sides. What were your expectations going in, and what were some of the differences?
Yeah, so I've had two stints in the public sector. My first one was so what caused me to leave my career at Blue Cross and Blue Shield was I got a call from the White House and from the Department of Health and Human Services. And President George H.W. Bush was elected and asked his friend Lou Sullivan, who is the head of Morehouse Medical School, to head up the Department of Health and Human Services. And he was looking around for someone to head up the office that regulated managed healthcare organizations like HMOs. And so it was an area that he was unfamiliar with and something that I was involved with at the very beginning of that industry. And so at the tender age of, I think I was 31 years old when I ended up becoming head of that regulatory office. So that was a whole story in itself, and all the learnings I had to do transitioning from the private sector to the public sector. As an add-on to that, it was the idea of Bush 41's administration to integrate HMO options for the elderly under the Medicare program and for the disadvantaged, which would be under the Medicaid program. So when I reflect back and look at Medicare Part C, which I'm on right now, I helped birth that. And so it's kind of strange to be involved in the very seeds of that program, which have now become very, very commonplace. But my second stint in public service started with the Bush transition, Bush 43, George W. Bush. As you know, that was a truncated time because of the contested election. And so we really had about 1/3 the time that a normal president-elect has to figure out how to take control over government. And so the challenge that I thought was very interesting is if you had all that time, it's really hard to do. But if you only have 1/3 the time, how do you end up doing that? The president elect liked what I was doing and asked me to come with him when he was sworn in to become one of the very first White House staffers. So my initial stint, which was about 5.5 years, I helped advise him on who he should appoint to the top 4,000 positions in government. So the way that our government is structured is that when a president wins an election, they should be able to implement the agenda that they won on. And as a result, all the senior leadership positions in government get to be appointed by him or her. And my job was to advise the president on who he should make as Surgeon General or the head of OSHA or the Secretary of Labor or Secretary of Education, that type of thing. So that was my first stint. That was 5.5 years. And when I adopted my first daughter, the president asked me to give him a list of things that would give me more of the lifestyle that I was seeking as I was trying to be a good father to this young girl that I had adopted. And I gave him a list and he gave me a ring saying, "You're going to become the next Mint director." And it was just pretty amazing to me becoming the Mint director because, I was the son of immigrants growing up in our family's restaurant. Anyone who knows the Chinese immigrant story and restaurants, kids man the cash register because the family trusted family to oversee the money. And, as a bored 10-year-old kid, started a coin collection. Fast forward 30 years later, 40 years later, I'm head of the organization that made those coins, only in America.
What an amazing story. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. As you were in a role advising the president on what potential people to put into roles, you're looking at leadership qualities that you're looking at leaders in a different way than most people. You're trying to understand character, not just effectiveness. You're trying to understand, and we talk a lot about servant leadership. How did you even navigate those conversations?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Chris. And, every president does it differently. George Washington did a very good job trying to set the precedent for future presidents to follow, all the way through my boss, George W. Bush. And I've been involved tangentially on some of the Trump transition stuff. And I can say choosing people is a reflection of what the president's priorities and culture wants to be. And George W. Bush was very clear. He wanted people with extensive experience in the areas that they were being appointed to. under the belief that the best predictor of future performance is past performance. So he didn't want to take a winger on someone who's never done it before. He wanted someone with an extremely long, successful track record. He also was very clear in that he wanted people who played well in the sandbox together. While many of our appointees were superstars in themselves, they weren't the prima donna that whose ego drives the organization. What we were looking for were people who played extremely well on a team and cooperated to get things done. And then the last thing is what many presidents look for, and that is some loyalty or resonance with the policies and philosophies and ideas the president wants to implement in their particular areas. And so it was my job really when I interviewed, and boy, I've done like thousands upon thousands of interviews, was to kind of ferret out how well those people met that criteria. And in the end, the president would also ask us to take, those three were the priority. And within that, he expected diversity among the candidates, not in a DEI, a kind of faddish kind of way, but he would, take a look at my recommendations on chief financial officer for the Department of Energy. And he would say, you mean to tell me that there's not a Hispanic or an African American or a woman who has a CPA, who's had audit experience on the energy side that isn't qualified? I mean, you don't have a complete list. Go back and make sure I have choices.
Yeah. I mean, the pressure in purpose in your decision making is unbelievable. I mean,
I had a lot more hair, and it was a lot less gray than it is now, Chris.
But it is interesting, like from managing the cash register at a family business to now managing billions of dollars of national currency and taxpayer dollars as well. How did you even? What led you to be able to make such solid decisions? And I know there's decisions you probably wish would have changed, but how did you navigate that?
Yeah, another good question. And I think the simplest answer, it's a culmination of experiences and decisions that I've made my entire life. So the only way you make good decisions is you have mentors that teach you how to make good decisions, but you also make a lot of bad decisions along the way, and you learn from those. And in the end, the United States Mint, even though it's one of the first parts of our government when our country was founded and has this great legacy, in the end, it's just like any other business organization. You have to, in our case, our product is money. And the reason why we exist is to make sure that we have enough circulating coinage to keep America's economy going. But then you also have a secondary reason why we exist by law, and that is to make precious metal bullion for financial investors. And then with any excess capacity that we have, we end up making collector's versions of the first two products that were mandated. But also during my time, so it wasn't just how do we make money more efficiently and taking a look at the penny, and is there a way we can make a penny for under a penny, and asking those type of questions. But within the first year of my tenure as Mint director, the financial crisis started happening. And then you see the number of financial transactions in the country start to shrink because the economy is beginning to shut down. And when it does that, then you have logistical problems, like you have a certain amount of employees who make circulating coinage. If you don't need that much right now, then you have excess employees. But if you rip them or lay them off, that's a unique expertise. It's just not like there's a lot of coin makers in the United States. And then at the same time, you have financial investors who are panicking and they want gold and silver, and they want to get out of stocks and bonds and cash and plow it into something that is safer. And so our demand for gold bullion, for example, rose 700%. The demand for silver bullion rose 500%. And then you have supply chain issues, because it's not like I can go to Walmart and buy silver blanks to end up making coins. And so all those are really interesting problems, but they're also challenges for the nation that, if not done right, you contribute to economic calamity.
Wow. Even thinking about leading in your role during a financial crisis, what a lot of people talk to you about is money. And,
Yes.
and it's one of those things where you talk about money all day, and yet there's so much out of your control with the market and all of that kind of thing.
Yep.
When you think through, I've heard you talk a lot about integrity and stewardship and even aspects of servant leadership. How did you see that play out when you were director of the U.S. Mint?
Yeah, what you mentioned, those qualities are so important, because many of these jobs in government, whether it was me serving at the very beginning and having to deal with the most devastating terrorist attack on U.S. soil, which was 9/11, and then I participated in forming the Department of Homeland Security, which is the first cabinet department since 1949, when the Department of Defense was put together. There's no rule book. There's no professor. There's no research that has been done on how best to set up a new cabinet department, especially to tackle terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. Same thing with the financial crisis. We've had financial crises in our country, but the last one that even came close to, the worst financial crisis we've ever had was the Great Depression. There's no one alive to advise me on what they did in order to reorganize government to be able to tackle the Great Depression. So with the lack of resources and plowing new ground, you have to rely on some of these intangible things, like your integrity, what you believe is right and wrong, your moral values going through this. You have to trust your instincts. You have to cultivate the people around you to help support you through these things, because you're, again, plowing new territory that nobody else has.
It is just so fascinating to think about all the major global issues that you have had to think through in your role. And part of that is just because of the role you were in. As people listening are listening to you, they're probably thinking about the different pressures that they have on their own life, right? And how they deal with not global issues in most cases, but serious issues in their own life. And a lot of people talk about wealth and influence and view stewardship differently. And everyone is idolizing, in a way, success. How do you think leaders should even be thinking about wealth, influence, what success means? How do you help teach people the right way to walk through their own scenarios?
Yeah, well, very tough question. The best way I know how to answer that is focus less on you, the utilitarian, does this benefit me or not? How do I get out of it unscathed and get my reputation out? In all my situations, whether private sector and especially public sector, it helps to think of, I have temporary stewardship over this organization. And my responsibility is to leave this organization better than I found it, and to if I joined the organization, I've embraced its mission and to do what I can to help it fulfill its mission. And that's the great thing about public service is, certainly there are people around that are doing it because of ego or it's a stepping stone to something else they want in the private sector and so on. I was really fortunate in the George W. Bush administration, and partially because I was in charge of hiring much of it. I was surrounded by people who really cared about the country, right? And in the end, at the Mint, it's just not, how can I be on TV and enjoy the state quarter launches and that type of thing, which were all enjoyable. And I learned how to do media by being in the spotlight a lot. But what was the primary driver for me is the Mint's job is to make the economy run smoothly. Because if you don't get the money right, countries fail. And the proof is all over the world, countries that don't do money right, their people suffer. And in the United States, especially with the US dollar and the importance that it has all over the world, it's important to get that money right. And so I viewed my job as to execute the mission of the Mint to the best of my ability and make sure that the people who help me do that understand what that mission is, that I equip them, that I encourage them, and that when I leave, my hope is, gosh, the Mint did its job better than any other time, and its people were happy that Ed Moy was leading.
And I have heard from so many people that know you personally and speak of your high character, but also just from...
Yeah, that's because I paid them a lot of money, Chris.
Also from reading stories about how you led. I can't even imagine. Are there situations where, especially in financial crisis or other areas, where you felt like you had to make some really tough decisions that was not a popular opinion? And if so, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, again, another great question. And, I would say, so I'll bring up two examples that kind of illustrate what I just talked about. One of them is I want, under my tenure, we were able to retrain a lot of the circulating employees to work on the bullion side. And from that, we didn't have to lay people off when circulating demand went down. And at the same time, we upped our production of gold and silver bullion to the point where it was kind of a miracle that we were able to improve the supply chain for us to be able to do it. And then we made record amounts of gold bullion and silver bullion coins. And through all of that, our employees really worked extremely hard for the American taxpayer to the point where it was a grind. But in the end, what I'm proud to say is when I joined the Mint in 2006, one of the important surveys in government that every agency takes, and then we judge our performance based on it, is the Best Places to Work survey. And out of 217 parts of government, when I joined the Mint in 2006, we were 211, right at the very bottom. When I left, even with all that hard work that we did at the Mint, we jumped up to 58. It was the largest jump in that survey of any part of government in the history of that survey. And so I can look back saying, yes, we ran hard, but people felt like they satisfied this mission to help save the country's finances during the second worst economic crisis in our country's history. So, so that's one of how do you manage during a tough time, but yet improve morale when everyone's running ragged. But the other two was when you take a look at the financial crisis, in many ways, it wasn't this simple, but without doing a 45-minute lecture on what the options were, you can basically break it down into a binary decision, right? You had all these financial institutions that were on the verge of collapse. Then there was a liquidity crisis. And if they were to collapse, that would cause a worldwide depression, not a recession, a worldwide depression, because of the influence of the United States and the US dollar on the global monetary system. But if you were to bail them out and save the world from a deep depression, and smooth it out to maybe a long recession instead, you would also be removing the punishment for the people who got us into this position in the first place. And so on one hand, you could punish the bad doers and plunge the world into a depression and hurt 9 billion people. Or you could take it easy on the institutions that made all the bad decisions and smooth it out so that it didn't go into a depression, but a milder recession, right? Those are kind of unpleasant choices. And what I viewed is the secretary, just like when I served the president, they deserve to have your very best advice and opinion, regardless of what everybody else was saying. And I felt that I had done my duty by bringing that up and talking about the moral hazard about doing the bailouts. Now, at the same time, the secretary made his decision and then went to the president to get the president's approval. And in the end, I had a choice of either supporting what we did or resigning, versus some appointees in other administrations would then stay in and then give anonymous interviews in the press saying, they went that way, but I'm the only one who, principally disagreed and think it's the wrong thing. That doesn't help anybody. So there's a certain culture in Washington, especially under the George W. Bush administration. We either saluted to the decisions and did our best to implement them, but if we found them to be too much for us, it is honorable to resign and let the president do what he wants to do.
That is such a fascinating insight into the behind the scenes of how some of those things are decided on. What advice do you give to other emerging leaders who are involved in trying to make an impact or trying to make tough decisions but feel overwhelmed by the different challenges they're facing?
Yeah. I can only talk from my own experience, and that is you really business schools can teach you the technical parts about making a decision. But the most important piece of that is your own moral code and your own worldview. So I would encourage emerging leaders to really seek out what is your North Star. And from that, allow your decisions to always be within the spectrum of what you feel is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you talk a little bit about being faithful in the little things, especially in great places of responsibility. How do you help teach that to other people?
Well, one effective way, and it was how I learned, was being mentored by someone who has more experience than you have in the same field. And I was really fortunate in my very first job. It was interesting. I'll just rewind the tape for 30 seconds. And that is, I grew up in a family who had no experience with faith issues. And in college, my senior year, I came to the Christian faith and that's where I met, and that's where I made my commitment. And that has, for me, been my North Star. Being able to seek out what is right from the God that is described in the Bible. And from there, so this gets into the mentorship. So when I graduated from school, all my Christian friends say, "Oh, well, your highest calling is to go into the ministry." And I'm going like, I'm kind of new at this. What is the ministry? Oh, that's becoming a pastor, a parachurch worker, etc. And I said, well, I kind of know what they do, but I don't have any of I'm not gifted in that area. I'm really gifted in this issue of solving business problems. And they all said, well, good luck to you. And maybe you can redeem your work by sharing your faith at work. And that's why God will give you a platform working for other companies. So I went into the workplace feeling that was not right, and that my job was to, again, help, join a company whose mission I agreed with, that was within the spectrum of what I believed was honorable to what God was doing. Health insurance, protecting people from financial calamity because of a heart attack or maternity. Those are really important things. And how do I get that right? Because that helps people flourish, which is one of the job tasks that God gives us in Genesis chapter 1. But no one else agreed with me. When I went to new employee orientation, our senior vice president of the unit that I was going to be in came in and kind of did his thing about what his management style was and where he wanted to take the company, etc. And I went, okay, that's nice. He's a good guy. I totally understand that. That Sunday, I saw him walk out of church, the same church I was going to. So I asked him, I went right up to him and I said, okay, I'm like 8 levels below you. You don't know me, but I was in on your orientation remarks. I have to ask you, if you're going to this church, are you a Christian? And he said, yes, I am. And I said, and how long have you been a Christian? And he said, for about 30 years. And I said, so does that encompass your time in the health insurance industry? He said, yeah, I've been in the health insurance industry all that time. And I said, would you mind getting together with me and sharing the lessons that you've learned, both good and bad, trying to live out your faith in the environment of health insurance? And I will say that was the single most important thing that supercharged my leadership abilities and was the foundation of many of the interesting things that I've been able to do since then.
Wow. And it literally was just you making the effort to go and have that conversation, which then shaped the way you view a lot of your professional work experience after being mentored. So yeah, hopefully people can take that away as just a next step, is to go find somebody. What if somebody feels like there is nobody that they're connected to? How would you go about encouraging somebody to find someone? No pressure.
Well, it also helps to be part of organizations that intersect with this world. And you and I met at the New Canaan Society's national conference, and New Canaan ends up attracting a lot of men who are in similar situations. And one of the reasons why you and I are talking is we felt that we had some chemistry and some like interests, and so I would encourage people to be connected with similar organizations. Just even on the political front, even though politics, most people know me for my public service, but that's really only been 1/3 of my career. 2/3 of my career have been in the private sector. But even on the public service side, when I was at the White House, which is the pinnacle of the executive branch, And our Constitution has three separate but equal branches of government. The legislative branch, Congress, both the House and the Senate is the other one, and then the judicial branch. And it helped for me to reach out to Christians who are in both the legislative and judicial branches. And you should know, just even with a little scratching on the surface, on the congressional side, there's an organization called Faith and Law. It was started by a bipartisan group of chiefs of staff who were wondering what difference does it make being a Christian, and how does that influence how you advise your principal, which is either a House of Representatives or a senator, and how do you do your best job in helping them accomplish an agenda that benefits the entire nation. And so Faith and Law, and when I started the White House Christian Fellowship at that time, we collaborated a lot together with speakers as well as the different policy initiatives that we were doing.
Wow. Ed, I think we're going to have you back to talk about some of this faith and work stuff at some point, because this is just so fascinating. I've heard you talk in much more detail on it too. Before I let you go, though, I want to ask you 10 rapid fire questions where you just say the first thing that comes to your mind and there's no wrong answer.
All right.
Who's the first person you think of when I say servant leadership?
George W. Bush.
5 words that most describe you.
5 words?
5 words.
Humble with lots to be humble about. Taking a riff off of Winston Churchill.
I like that. All right. Favorite author or book?
I am an avid reader, and I read lots. I love both fiction and nonfiction and history, and I just put it down as I love to read. Way longer answer than you want.
Perfect. Favorite movie then? Might be harder.
Favorite movie. I vary a lot, but top on my list right now is the 9 movies that make up the Skywalker saga. Because I think it is a really special way to bring up much broader issues of faith and honor and service, etc.
Wow. Favorite food?
Favorite food. So as you can see, I'm not the smallest Chinese guy you've ever seen. I enjoy food, but I enjoy everything. So my passion is about authentic foods, the way that they're supposed to be done. So I like carbonara without cream in it. I like it made exactly the way they make it in Rome.
Wow. Love that. Favorite thing to do in your free time?
Spend time with my family.
All right. What is a surprising fact about you?
I grew up in the restaurant, so I have cooked virtually all of our meals in our 43-year marriage.
Wow, that's cool. Favorite place you've been?
It would be a tie between the Amalfi Coast and Paris.
All right. Is there anywhere you want to go that you have not visited yet?
I would love to just get lost in Croatia, Montenegro, and all those countries on that coast.
All right. And finally, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
From my mentor, and that is to be faithful, trust in God.
Great advice. Well, Ed, thank you so much for taking time to be with us and share some of your wisdom with our audience.
Thanks for having me, Chris. It was a lot of fun. And I'm open to doing it again.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Servant Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss an update. Be sure to check out the servantleadershippodcast.org for more updates and additional bonus content.